Hello, Ian here. Now that I have this YouTube channel, I thought I could use it to make videos where I just simply give my thoughts on different things. So there's a recent issue that's come up, and I feel like I should comment on it, and that issue is evangelical Christianity. After Ted Cruz won Iowa, there were a lot of alt-right people on Twitter complaining that, oh, Cruz only won because you have all these evangelicals that don't want to vote for Trump because he doesn't talk about Jesus enough. So I guess I just want to talk a bit about evangelicalism because I think a lot of people don't understand it, and I'd like to set them straight. A little background about myself. I come from an evangelical background, and I'm currently exploring orthodoxy, which I hope will be my new path as a Christian. In the Christianity hangout I did last week, I talked about this a little bit, but yeah, I just thought I'd mention that for the sake of anybody who's wondering. Uh, I'm not an expert on evangelical Christianity necessarily, but I know generally what it's like inside the bubble, and I know what the people are like just from having interacted with them for most of my life. So I feel like I'm qualified to comment on that. Just so we're clear what I mean by evangelicalism, I'm referring to the style of low church Protestantism, which basically emphasizes many things. Like, for instance, as the name would imply, there's an emphasis on evangelism, or spreading the gospel and bringing more people to Jesus. Uh, they view salvation as being a born-again experience, like you have to accept Jesus as your Savior and that makes you saved. They talk about things like having a personal relationship with Jesus, and they emphasize the Bible as the guide to everything, and they don't necessarily regard tradition as being a part of that. So anyway, on the alt-right, it seems like the biggest problem a lot of people have with evangelicals is that they're a bunch of cucks, as that's how they see it. They point to the fact that they always support Israel very loyally. They do things like adopt babies of other races. They feel like it's their duty to welcome immigrants or refugees or that kind of thing. And to them, that's what they associate the faith with, or the brand of evangelicalism with. I don't know to what extent those things represent all evangelicals or even most evangelicals, but I can see how that stuff would be objectionable to a lot of people because I don't agree with that kind of stuff myself. But you have to look at the history of evangelicalism, and basically evangelicalism is rooted in growing the church, and it's constantly trying to make the church relevant to people. And there's actually a good article about this on Social Matter written by Nick B. Steves, which I'll link to below. I do think that there's always been a little bit of this in America because in the early days of America, when things were less settled and people were less grounded in certain geographical regions, a lot of churches had to sort of make it more palatable to the masses and had to kind of meet people where they were just to get them any sort of churching at all. And that's how the Methodist Church became a really large and influential denomination in the early years of America because it really developed a good model for reaching people, and it had a very flexible style in terms of how the services were held, and it was not as hierarchical. So that was kind of, I guess, what appealed to people at the time because they just needed spirituality of some sort, and that was the best way to get it to them. And that same spirit exists among evangelicals today because they're always trying to make it more hip. They're always trying to make it more seeker-friendly because that's how they win converts. And basically the kind of people who are attracted to this are people who are trying to fill a spiritual void in their life, and evangelical Christianity offers them a fairly simple solution. It just says you need to accept Jesus as your Savior and live a good moral lifestyle and you're good. As long as you follow the commandments, it's a fairly simple option. Now, I've seen some people on Twitter talk about evangelicals and the stuff they do and say that these people are basically traitors who deserve no quarter. Well, from my perspective, that's pretty ridiculous because, I know these people and I know what they're like, and that's a pretty absurd way to describe them. So, for those who don't understand these people, you have to know that most evangelicals really are not bad people. They're basically just middle Americans who are good and decent folks. They're very family oriented, generally pretty conservative, but along with that, they're not very intellectual, they're not very ideological for the most part. And the ones who are ideological, depending on which way they lean, are probably going to go toward SJWism or they're going to go toward fundamentalism. And for some people who look outside the bubble, they might either fall away from the faith completely, or like me, they're going to seek out traditionalism. They're going to seek out high church denominations. But for just the regular average people who are okay with evangelicalism, they'll basically accept what they're told from above. So they'll uncritically accept things like Zionism, which I don't think any of them could explain theologically. Really, it's just that there's some stuff in the Old Testament about how Jews are God's chosen people, and therefore, they have a special status that applies to them. Stuff that's very plausible to an average person who's not going to think too deeply about it. And the same with the xenophilia, this idea of that we should welcome in foreigners, the idea that we should make our families more diverse, shall we say. These are perversions of the idea of Christian charity, which again sound plausible to people who don't think too deeply. But the thing is, most of them are being pushed in that direction by leaders who are kind of unknowingly part of the cathedral. And I think if these people were left to their own devices, a lot of these ideas wouldn't even really occur to them. They would act more instinctively. So really the way I look at it is that evangelical Christians are a good argument for monarchy, because they're basically sheep in need of a good shepherd. And they need a shepherd that doesn't accept liberal premises and will stand strong against moral and cultural destruction. They need leaders who don't view the church as a business seeking customers, but they're willing to assert the eternal truth of the gospel, whether it's popular or not. Now, in our current state, I know that's easier said than done, but I think really the church should play a role in the state rather than be an independent institution located within its borders. So I guess basically what I'm saying is, yes, I understand a lot of the anger toward evangelical Christianity. It's very easy to get frustrated on the cuckiness, the soft liberalism of it, and some of the ridiculous, unintellectual stuff you see from it. I realize that's very unappealing, and it doesn't appeal to me either, which is why I'm moving away from it. But don't hate evangelical Christians themselves. Don't hate the practitioners. They're not the bad guys. They're basically just well-meaning people who are being led down the wrong path. If you're going to hate somebody, hate liberalism itself, because it has a foothold all over the West, and many Christians are in the grips of it without knowing it. But really, most evangelicals are good material to build a civilization with, so don't write them off. Basically, I guess the approach you should take to them is to forgive them, for they know not what they do.